Hello, I am doing this recording so I can kind of tell you what to do when you are taking a class, and to be more specific, when you're taking a class from me, because different people teach differently and they have different expectations. So, what applies in my class may not apply in classes that are taught by other people, and vice versa. So, what I'll do is I am going to use my tablet. So, this becomes a little bit more interactive. And if you think, you know how to study already, you know how to take classes already, you don't have to watch this. In other words, there's no actual content material in this particular recording. So what I'll do is I'm going to start with what people, or what I think people should do, or can be beneficial before class. Okay. So before class, my tablet screen is not working. So I'm going to have to close it and open it again. All right, so there we go. All right, so getting back to what I was talking about, before class. So before class, I think it is really important to review the previous one. So review the content of the previous class, just so that you can reestablish the context of what we talked about in the previous class, because typically with a class like CISP310 or many of your other programming classes, the new topic relates to the previous topic and so on. So it's really kind of important for you to reestablish the context from the class before. The other thing I think people can do, and I think it's going to be very beneficial, is to pre-read, in my case, the module to be discussed. In other words, because I go through the modules in a very sequential manner, so if you know that we are almost done with a particular module, pre-read the next one. Okay, because what that does is it will at least introduce some of the terms and also the concepts, prior to the actual lecture. So while you're pre-reading, you might want to jot down the concepts. Okay, so major concepts. We're talking about like major stuff, not the details. So I understand that in this class, I tend to include a lot of details. So the details you can leave it up to me to discuss in class. But the main concepts and how they connect, that's kind of important. You might also want to note the definitions. Okay, because definitions are always kind of important, because that's the basis of knowledge, which I'll kind of talk about in just a little bit. And also, if you have any questions while you're pre-reading the material, you might want to write down those questions on a piece of paper as well, or a Google Doc, whatever. Okay, so because when you're reading my module and you have a question, that means you're attempting to make connection between the concepts, but not quite, making the connections. But that's okay, because that's before the lecture, and I use the lecture as the more interactive way of explaining the concepts and how they connect to each other. So it's perfectly okay to have questions when you're just reading the material, when you're pre-reading material that I have not lectured on yet. Okay, so that's perfectly okay. Um, and also, um, just kind of review previous labs. Okay, especially if you find one that you thought, hey, this is really, there's a lot of content in the lab. And I do put actual content in the labs. So a lot of the hands-on and a lot of the more concrete type of knowledge is actually embedded into the labs. So the lab is not intended for people to just kind of go, oh, I'm just going to rush and get this done, because sometimes, most of the time, I allow multiple attempts and there are multiple choices too. So that means, if somebody is really quick at um, selecting and then submitting, selecting and submitting, selecting and submitting, just by trial and error get to the right answers, they can breeze through some of the labs really quickly. But it doesn't mean those people are understanding the knowledge that is embedded into the instructions of the lab. So it's really important to also get the knowledge that is embedded into the lab activities. Okay, so I think that is important. Obviously, it is subjective, and people can disagree with me. That's perfectly okay as well. Okay, so these are kind of the stuff that I think is important before class. I'll leave some space here because I think there might be some items that I might have forgotten. So now we'll talk about what about during class, not during, during class. So during a lecture, um, I think it kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say anyway. Pay attention. So from some of the questions I get, from on Discord, I think they are evidence that some people may not be paying attention or paying as much attention as needed in this class. So I'll give you an example. When people ask, "Oh, what is the passcode of doing something?" or "What is the word of road taking today?" That is indicative that some people may not be paying attention. Because when I say those things, I also type on the Discord text channels. So if people were paying attention, I would expect people to be writing that down, copying and pasting, screenshotting, whatever way they want to use, to copy that onto their own PC, so they can then utilize the access code to do the lab or know what word to use for the road taking activity. This is also why I just randomly pick a time to take roles, so that people kind of to give people more incentive to continue to pay attention in class. Now, obviously, some people, they may not want to do that, and they might have a few friends, and they just kind of collectively, pay attention. Yeah, that would be a interesting word. They're paying collective attention in class. So when one person is not paying attention, the other ones are paying attention. So when someone misses something, they will ask the others. That is not going to be very productive. I don't think it's very productive. But if people want to disagree with me, that is fine as well. Okay. So, but I'm just going to say what is important, okay, from my perspective, paying attention. So, when people pay attention, they will be focusing on what I say, because everything on screen is being recorded. So, there's no need to be very busy jotting down the notes and copying everything that I do on the screen. It is what is not on the screen and what I'm not saying that is important. That would be your own thoughts. Okay, so if you are making a connection between two concepts, then you might want to write it down, because watching the YouTube is not going to be helpful if you want to remind yourself your own thoughts during the lecture. Okay, so note taking. Now, these days, obviously, if you want to take notes, there are many ways to do it. If you're faster typing than your handwriting, you can use Google Doc, where you don't really have to remember to save something, right? And the school has a Gmail account for you with basically limitless, capacity. So I would just use that as a way to take notes. If you have a really handy screenshotting tool, and I'm pretty sure many of you have one for various purposes, use it. Okay, you can just screenshot what I have on screen, the terminal, whatever. Okay, and then copy and paste it into the Google Doc. Okay, if you think that is particularly important, copy and paste it. Okay, I mean, I'm fairly sure that you guys know how to do it. Okay, it's just a matter of doing it. Okay, all right. So after note taking, when I pause and ask, "Are there any questions?" I'm not, I'm seriously, okay, wanting you guys to ask questions. Okay, so formulate questions. So this is the part that gets interesting because how do you know whether you understand a concept or not? So I'm assuming people are paying attention because people who don't pay attention, people who are multitasking, people who think that I can just watch the video later, people who think, I don't need this, okay, I can, I have been taking other classes where I don't really have to pay attention in class and I pass those classes. They can choose whatever they want to do, okay? But I am expecting people to be paying attention because I think that is crucial when it comes to taking my classes. So, assuming people are paying attention, people are taking notes, people have read the modules prior to the class, people who have basically reviewed what have been talked about in previous classes and previous labs, then it is important to understand how previous concepts connect to the new concept or the new knowledge that I'm presenting, during class. Because if there's no linking between what have been learned before and what is being taught at this point, then it might be a good time to ask questions. Okay, so what kind of question would be appropriate or would be indicative of yes, these are very good questions and they really should be asked. Okay, um, so it would be how the current topic connects with previous topics. Okay, now if somebody is to ask me just this question of how does this relate to what we have learned before, that is very general, okay? And that is not a very specific question. It's not going to be very beneficial. So it is far more important or far more productive to ask specific questions. I'll give you an example, okay? So if somebody was to ask, okay, we just talked about exclusive or, isn't this the same way of implementing the R function, except before, we have a longer R function that makes use of and not and or, and how are these two approaches, different if they actually give us the same result? That would be a very good question to connect a current topic, which is exclusive or, to something that we talked about before. Another type of question you can ask is you think you kind of get the idea, but you're not really sure. Okay, and what you can do is to come up with an example. Okay, so I'm gonna write it down here. Examples, and ask TAC to either validate your own answer or to answer your question. So you can basically say, okay, so if I understand this concept correctly, then when we subtract this bit pattern from that particular bit pattern, then we should get this particular result, and that flag should be a 1, that flag should be a 0, and so on. Okay, and then you can ask me, is that correct? Am I doing this correctly? Okay, so that would be a really great kind of question to ask because it is giving yourself a way to work out an example, and then it's also giving me something to do. And if my answer turned out to be different from yours, then it means, maybe in your understanding of this material, there's a gap somewhere. On the other hand, if I say, nope, your answer is perfectly right, okay, that is the way to do it, then you have a confirmation that your understanding is in fact correct. So I think those are really good things to do. Now, it does require effort on your part, okay, because you have to kind of actively be working out examples to test your own understanding of what we are learning in this class. All right. And I need to go back to note taking here, and also the pre-reading. So I'm gonna link these two with a junction. Okay. So because these two are related. Okay. When you're note taking or when you're pre-reading and you want to jot down something, what is important? Okay. So I wrote this down a little bit already, definitions. So you definitely want to focus on definitions because definitions is where all the reasoning starts, okay? And without knowledge, okay, definition is basically knowledge. So without knowledge, there's nothing we can really do. For instance, I'll give you a very good example. When people ask me, what is Q? When we talk about binary addition and subtraction, and I have already talked about how Q is defined multiple times, okay? And both in the form of a manual way of performing addition or subtraction, and also in terms of gate logic, where Q is as a node. So when people ask that question, it is reflecting a lack of knowledge and not understanding the definition. That is not going to be productive because without definition, there's nothing we can do. Okay, so you gotta be able to identify the definitions and be able to look them up quickly. I don't really expect people to memorize all the definitions, but I do expect people to be taking notes or be highlighting the PDF so that it's easy for them to find the definitions. But in their mind, okay, I do expect people to say, yes, we have learned what Q is. I kind of know what Q is. It's sitting somewhere between XY and T or K. I just cannot remember exactly how it is defined, but I know where to find the definition. That is what I do expect, when people take classes. Um, so you have to kind of do whatever it takes to get this part done. Okay, I would suggest just highlighting my notes, or you can keep your own notes of all the different definitions. I would say taking your own notes is super important. I don't know how many people actually do it. I really don't, and it is really not something that I I have control over. Okay, so but you have to figure out a way so that you can keep track of knowledge because without knowledge we can forget about problem solving or the application of the knowledge because what are you going to apply if you do not have the knowledge? So that is really important, and that's kind of relates back to note taking. All right, next, let's just say that I'm asking, okay, are there any questions about what we just talked about? And you are thinking, and you're coming up with an example, but you think you might need a little bit more time to get it done, okay? Then you can let me know, okay? You can let me know either through the text channel of the same date, okay, which is usually what I pay attention to when I look at Discord on the side, or you can just DM me, direct message me on Discord. You can just say, okay, I need more time. Then I'll announce to the class and go like, okay, let's spend a little bit more time to think about this. I am not gonna announce people the name of people who DM me. Okay, so rest assured that your identity will not be disclosed. Okay, so the only people who can be judging you would be yourself and me. And I can tell you that I do not judge people when they ask questions. So that leaves just you. Okay, and I think judging yourself, because you have questions to ask in class is counterproductive. So don't do that. I would suggest you not to do it, but if people choose to judge themselves, because they have questions to ask in class, I cannot say anything, okay? Because that's an internal dialogue between you and yourself. But I would strongly encourage people to ask questions. So getting back to formulating questions, okay? So asking how a specific current topic connect with a previous topic, that is really helpful. Giving me examples, either with your solution for me to validate, or giving me an example so that I can solve the example. That would also be a very good way to solidify your understanding of the material, and at the same time slowing me down because if nobody asks questions, I'm going to assume people understand the topics. Okay, I am not a mind reader. I cannot tell whether people have questions or not, especially when this is done over Discord, and I cannot and I do not want to see people's face because I'm concentrating on my screen to look at the topics that I'm trying to teach. So it'll be very difficult for me to look on the side, look at about 30 faces, and see which one seems to be troubled or confused, right? So I cannot do that. Okay, I cannot tell whether people have questions or not. If people have questions, they have to let me know that they have a question or they need more time to formulate a question. That is perfectly okay to ask for more time to formulate a question. Okay. All right. So during class, we got paying attention, taking notes, formulating questions. Okay. And now we're going to talk about, after class, okay? After class and lab, okay? I do know this class is late, okay? So when we're all done, it can be 8:30 or so, okay? Well, technically the lab should end at 8:20, and we're tired, okay? Some of you work during the day, and taking this class in the evening, I mean that makes a very full day. That's okay, I understand it. But sometime before the next class, this is a loop. This is a loop because you kind of have to go back and review what we have talked about before. Okay, because that really is important because it is you reinforcing your understanding of the material. Oh, I forgot about one thing during class. Okay, so I'm gonna use this as an insertion point. Timestamp, because you know that I record everything, and you also know that the time is up here in the recording. So there's the actual real time. So that makes it easier for you to actually um, take note of the time and be able to fast forward to a particular timestamp. Because let's just say, okay, this is a future topic. Okay, let's just say that I just announced, okay, now we're going to talk about the overflow flag. Okay, and you are telling yourself and go like, okay, this is the first time in the lecture that tech is talking about the overflow flag. I pre-read the module. It is something that is important, but I'm not 100% sure how it works. Then you might want to jot down the time. Okay, so I'm just going to use the current time as an example. So you might want to jot down the time of, okay, at 8:10 on what date tech talked about the overflow flag. Okay, because that will allow you in the future to go back to a lecture and going back to a very specific point off by maybe a minute at the most, and you can just rewatch. Okay, what I talked about when I introduced the concept of overflow, instead of just going like, yeah, I kind of remember he talked about it, but I cannot remember when he talked about it. Okay, so, and you might even want to jot down that time and put a note or little post-it, however you want to do it, okay, physically, electronically, and put it next to the module when it talks about the overflow flag. So this way you have the printed content, the text description of what the overflow flag is, and next to it is a pointer, okay, so to speak, a pointer to a video that is on YouTube. You can go back to the YouTube video at any time and watch it again. So that makes it easier for you to review the content because let's just say that in the lab there's a question about, okay, find the overflow flag of this addition or subtraction or whatever. Okay, you can go back to the module first, okay, because I'm assuming that you are keeping track of, guess what, the definitions, right? So now in the definition, you can also look up and find out, in the video, when I start to talk about that concept. So now you can retrieve, okay, the whole discussion of that concept if you need to refer back to it. Okay, I think that is important. I think there's only one point I want to make, before I stop this nagging session. Okay, it has to do with deadlines. Okay, I do not. I'm expecting people to read the syllabus, but in case some people have not read the syllabus or have forgotten in the syllabus, the deadline of Canvas is absolute. Okay, if Canvas says it's time, it is time. I'm not gonna give people an extra 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or to say, oh, I'm about to turn in a file, but I cannot get it done on time. If it is after the deadline on Canvas, I'm not going to take it. Okay? Because if I do take it, okay, if let's just say somebody said, oh, okay, I got it done actually on time, but I couldn't turn it in because I was just doing it when the system timed out and locked me out, okay, and I could not turn it in. If I let someone do it, after 1 minute, what about the person who got it done a minute and a half after the deadline? If I let that person submit the file, what about the person that is 2 minutes behind? What about if I let that happen? You can see how this is a slippery slope because this relates to proof by induction, right? Because if I let someone to turn in something that is 1 minute late, what about the next minute? 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 So using proof by induction, I can apply this reasoning indefinitely. So sooner or later, somebody is going to say, I'm only off by an hour, but you let that person who was late by 59 minutes to turn it in, so you should let me turn it in too. So the answer is no. Okay, the answer is very simple. If Canvas is out of time, then it is out of time. Now, someone's going to say and go like, but according to my clock, it is not quite that time yet, and then the system timed me out. Canvas uses a system time, which is basically synchronized to the atomic clock in Colorado. And I'm not expecting you guys to buy a clock just for this class because you can track that time. But there are websites out there that can tell you what the current time is supposed to be. So I'm just going to do a quick Google search here. Okay, so we'll Google search for atomic time now. And let's see if our taxes is paid and getting something done useful in a useful way. And guess what? Yes, we do. Okay, and I can check this against my computer time because my computer time is also synchronized with the atomic clock, and they are accurate to the second. Okay, now just because this is accurate to the second, and let's just say something is due at 8:20 p.m. Okay, it doesn't mean that you want to click that submit button by 8:19:59 and off by only 1 second. The lag time and the turnaround time, to the server and back, there's no guarantee. Okay, so you need to leave enough time so that the system will receive the file prior to the deadline. Okay, now how far back do you need to push that time? I do not know. I'm not going to say anything. Okay, you kind of have to gauge it. It's just like, yeah, I'm not going to say anything. I'll just say that, when Canvas says it's time, it is time. That's all I'm going to say. So I'm not expecting people to argue or to ask for additional time because Canvas or in the test, the time has run out. Okay, if the time runs out according to the system, it has run out. Okay, so that is not the deadline on Canvas and the deadline when we take a test online. That deadline is not a suggestion. It is hard and absolute. So now you know that. All right. So that is what I have to say about deadline. So I'm gonna make another video that is topic specific to kind of go over this lab here. Um, and So this would be the end of this uh, really long nagging session. Okay, so if you're watching all the way up to here, I do appreciate your patience and your attention and your dedication to taking this class and trying to do everything that you can to succeed in this class. So thank you.